Hey everybody, it's Mike Johnson, PWInsider.com here. Very excited and happy to be speaking to a most interesting personality when it comes to the history of professional wrestling, because with the launch of WWE's Women's Revolution and women's professional wrestling being in vogue, the first ever women's professional wrestling company, which I remember fondly watching on Channel 5 in New York City, was Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling Glow. We're here with the founder of that promotion, who is now running the WOW Women of Wrestling promotion, which is going to be running some events in the California area later this month. And that, of course, is David McLane. How are you, sir?
Fabulous. Thank you, Mike. I'm a follower of you, and it's a pleasure to speak to you today.
I am extremely excited about this because, Glow holds a fondness in my heart. I have a big nostalgia for it, as I'm sure many other people who are listening to this do, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But WOW Superheroes, which you and your business partner Jeanie of the Los Angeles Lakers have been working on for quite a while. You guys just ran a test event in Los Angeles, and you've got a big taping coming up on the 29th. So talk a little bit about the current incarnation of WOW and what the current plans are. And I think anybody who's listening kind of gets the idea. This is about very strong, vibrant, colorful female characters doing battle in the ring. Talk a little bit about the current incarnation and what the plans are for this.
Well, Jeanie Buss, my partner, she came to me a few years ago, about 2012 or 2013, and said, I think it's time to pull out WOW from the archives, and let's rev it up, because digital marketing is going to be taking off in the next year or two, and I think there's going to be an opportunity for us to leverage it. And I was at ESPN at the time, and working there doing some live events and programming for the past 17 years. Subsequently, we took the original WOW Women of Wrestling programs that were in distribution. I think in New York, in your hometown, they were on PIX at midnight, I believe.
Yep, and, Channel 11, WPIX, absolutely.
That's right. Where Glow, I think, was on your Channel 5 Saturday or Sunday afternoons, if my memory's correct on that.
You are correct again. In fact, it actually aired right after WWF programming, so it was a nice 2-hour block there.
Yes, that's right. So we put the old WOW, the original WOW programs, on the air in Las Vegas on ABC Network for about a year and tested them to see what the response would be, and it was fabulous. The ratings were excellent on the ABC affiliate there on Sunday afternoons. We were only beat by golf on occasion. And subsequently, we then were able to negotiate a contract with what we call a local casino, because it appeals to the locals of Las Vegas. They're a national brand. They have casinos out in the East Coast, in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, etc. And we shot live events there and shot them in fabulous 4K, red cameras, and took them out to the marketplace to see what the receptiveness would be. And we learned where there was some networks interested in WOW. None would say, hey, we're in it for the long haul. And at that point, Jeanie Buss said, let's go totally digitally, and we'll come back to broadcast, traditional broadcast, as those opportunities avail themselves. So we really took the WOW programming, took it out into the marketplace, and did something that I had not done in my past, which was met with the actual wrestling fans. I consider myself a wrestling fan. I grew up in wrestling, as many of your listeners know, but we wanted to get a perspective of the fans. So we literally went to New York, New Jersey, Miami, Kentucky, and parts of California, and took our programming to the fans so the fans could help us navigate what type of women's wrestling program they really wanted to see. And we think we've nailed it. And we put the programs on our flagship WOWE.com website, and then built out our social media platforms, the WOW world, with WOW Superheroes as the name for, Instagram, Facebook, all of our platforms. And the fans' response has been excellent. And what we've learned from the fans, we sort of divided up the drama and the build-up to the matches, and we put the matches on separately. And we found out the fans really wanted the combination of the drama and the matches to culminate all as one. And that's what's going to be happening with the new programming that will launch in, I think Thanksgiving Day will be a first glimpse for the fans from the live matches that are being shot next Thursday night. There's still time. Even if you're in New York, you could fly out. They've got those great JetBlue flights, Mike. Next Thursday night in Los Angeles, downtown, WOW returns to L.A., and we'll be at the historic theater, the Belasco Theater, for a showcase of WOW. And when I say showcase, they'll have like a $70,000 light system and a 10,000 watts of pounding audio coming at the fans in this historical theater. And we've got some great wrestlers on the show. There's going to be Santana Garrett, Amber O'Neal. She's flying in. We've got Aveline Maverick, whom some of your listeners may know from the Texas area, as Barbie Hayden. We've got Holodead, who's a popular wrestler that wears wild makeup and costume. And we've got some of the WOW superstars. Jungle Girl, the world champion, will be there. Steffi Slays, Kika Rush. And, of course, one of the fan favorites, Caged Heat. Loca and Built a Lot of Pain, they'll be there. And fan favorites in the South that listen to your programming will remember a wrestler by the name of Bambi, and her name's Selena Majors. She's bringing in her cousin from Kentucky, Jessie Jones, so they'll be in there battling the Psycho Sisters, Spike, and whom many of your fans may know as Christina Von Airy, but in WOW her name is Razor. So it'll be a fun night of action. Over 8 matches on the card, and tickets are only $15 with VIP meet and greets with the wrestlers and gift bags upwards to $95. So it's a great evening.
As you guys try to build this brand and launch it, I'm curious, how different is it between the original rollout of Glow, which was, market-to-market syndication, and something like today? Because, you would think it would be easier because of the technology, but I think things are so much more fragmented now. It's actually harder to get a brand and build it from the ground up. So, talk about the differences between the original rollout of Glow in the 80s and trying to roll out WOW now and beginning to build it on so many platforms.
In the major respect of what you just said, you're 100% correct. It's harder now because of the fragmentation of programming and the diversity of all the platforms to get your content out. So it's harder. And it's also harder to connect with the fans because in the old days when Glow came out, even when I go through an airport today, people will say, hey, I remember you from Glow. Well, there were really only 4 stations on the air in the 80s. ABC, NBC, CBS, and an independent. As Glow reached its midpoint, Fox came on the airwaves. They basically bought up a lot of the local independents. So there was 5 networks for television, and that was really it. I mean, for cable TV, most of the country did not have it. As you recall, in the early 80s when people were, wanting to get cable TV into their house, one of the leading factors was TBS because you could watch Georgia Championship Wrestling on TBS. And you could go to try to get WGN. I remember that was a huge deal when WGN was picked up by the cable companies. And you could watch the Cubs nationally. So, back then, if you turned on your television, that was it. You saw four, 5 stations, and Glow saturated the marketplace, especially with respects to most stations, as you said, ran it back to back with WWE, or they ran it in a block of wrestling, and it was also on in the daytime and Saturday mornings between 9 and 1 o'clock. That doesn't even exist today, even with cable, even for WWE. There's no Saturday morning wrestling program, which was the stable of wrestling for good knows how many years, 20, 30 years. So in that respect, it's harder to build the brand because everyone's doing something, and there's so much technology, and people are living on their cell phones. So it's harder to connect. And the climb is harder. Now, that said, on the flip side of that coin, I remember when we launched Glow at the 1985 NAFTE television convention, and out of that NAFTE, there were about 200 and some new programs being presented to get distribution vis-a-vis television and/or syndication, which was hot at that time. And we were only one, and I may not have the exact number, but one of approximately 19 programs that got picked up to roll out for the fall in syndication. So, to that respect, it was more difficult because if you had a product back then and you believed in it and you invested in it, you were totally at the mercy of the television programmers and general managers to pick you up. And then you had to have a sufficient number of markets, over 70-some%, if you could consider grabbing any advertising revenue. So, there's the pros and the cons of growing then and now. We were fortunate with Glow. It hit immediately, and subsequently it skyrocketed to popularity. WOW has been a slow and steady growth, evidence of the fact I just mentioned to you about 10 minutes ago. We went out and met with the wrestling fans to find out what were they missing in their viewing habits and their fun of watching wrestling. What did they want to see? So a little more research went into this one than just my gut feeling of being a wrestling fan.
Wanted to get your opinion on the fact that Netflix is going to be doing their own comedy drama series based around Glow, set in the 80s, and what your thoughts are on the just the nostalgia for Glow in general. Like, there was a documentary, which I know you weren't interviewed for, but it was a pretty good film. I don't know if you've seen it. What's your thoughts on just that sort of resurgence of the nostalgia? Do you think it's an 80s thing, or do you think it's a wrestling thing? Why do you think the original Glow still speaks to so many people all these years later?
1, it was the first. 2, it was fun. 3, it was over the top. And 4, there is a nostalgia. The people that are interested and recall it now are in their 40s and 50s, and so it was fun for them, and they recall it with a smile and a chuckle on their face. And I love it. I'm honored to see that it's having a resurgence, and I love the fact that Netflix sees that value also with its female writers that are writing that show. It's going to be a little edgier than the Glow that was on television, I can tell you that. I've seen some of their casting and heard some of and read some of their scripts that are initially out. So it's going to be a little racier. It's not going to be, in my opinion, family entertainment at all.
Right. When they did the documentary on Glow that came out a couple of years ago, how come they said you had declined to be interviewed? I'm curious why you didn't want to speak about the promotion for the film.
I didn't know the producers that were producing the film, and the film came off fabulously. I thought it was a great breath of demonstrating and showing the sisterhood of the Glow girls vis-a-vis Mount Fiji, and they're circling the wagons around her and her health issues. And I felt and still do feel that I should not be the focus of any things that happen with WOW. I think it should be the girls, the women, those that participated in it and sacrificed their time and effort to make it a success. And I just feel if I participate in things that I've been asked to, I would take away some of that shine and the light from the performers. And I don't say that at all egotistically. I just say that because, you know, many people know I'm the founder of it and the essence of it. And I just don't want to take 5 minutes away from the talent that participated in it.
That's a pretty fair and pretty mature response. You might be the only person who ever got involved in wrestling that didn't want attention.
Well, I'll tell you, I can tell you a surprise. I don't know if I should say their names yet, but there's an original cast of the Glow girls who've all reached out to me in the last week, and several of them will be at the Belasco Theater on the 29th, really celebrating the women that are currently wrestling in WOW, and celebrating, as I mentioned, that sisterhood that they all have. They share a special bond from participating in a sport that's really heavily, to this day, male-dominated. And so I'm honored that some of my colleagues from GLOW that were the talent have called me up. I've loved hearing from them, and they're coming to the WOW show next Thursday night in downtown LA. So you're going to have past GLOW stars there, original WOW Women of Wrestling stars there, and the current troupe of WOW Women of Wrestling. It's really going to be a women's wrestling celebration in downtown LA next Thursday night. And you've got, I want to bring special attention. I may be the guy that's been pushing for it for 3 days to improve women's wrestling, but it's Jeanie, the owner of the Los Angeles Lakers, who's really changing the status quo of it. And she's been out in front of it for 3 years before anything you've seen in the marketplace. And she's really a huge fan of the sport, the performers, and wants to see WOW succeed to the extent that it changes the status quo of how individuals perceive, look at women's wrestling, and how they digest it, really, with a digital perspective. So I don't want to leave that out. I think that's
absolutely
crucial for all fans to know that.
One of the things you mentioned that struck me when we were talking about GLOW is you said over the top and the over the top antics. How much of that sort of over the top, larger than life, vibrant antics are we to expect in this incarnation of WOW Women of Wrestling? Obviously, the one that was syndicated and did a pay-per-view about a decade or so, actually probably closer to 15 years ago now. That certainly played a lot of the same elements that the original GLOW did. This version, the WOW Superheroes, how over the top is it going to be in your mind?
The characters of WOW Women of Wrestling are more contemporary, and the subject matters are more, to some extent, real in the fact that the performers that are presented are real, true athletes, and we market them as such. In terms of the over-the-top antics, the opening, no one should miss the opening of this coming Thursday next week, the 29th event. It's going to be over the top. It's going to be spectacular. It's never been done. Nothing in GLOW or any other wrestling organization will match the opening ceremony of WOW next Thursday night. In terms of political satire and fun and comedy, we're not going to be as over the top as GLOW was. I don't think in today's climate, Norman Lear could get All in the Family produced and on the air. I don't think he could get the Jeffersons produced and on the air. In some respects, I don't even think MASH could get produced and put on the air today. Those comedies, those great shows, and GLOW being one of those great shows and comedies, and satires, just can't be done in today's atmosphere. Now, I kind of think that's a shame. I kind of think, the marketplace is a little too politically correct, and we can all take a laugh occasionally. But unfortunately, today's times, you can't go as over the top as you may have in the past 25, 30 years ago.
The one of the things about the original Glow, actually it was the PAL promotion that I was always fascinated with, is you got the women on the AWA Superclash pay-per-view that Vern Gagne put together. The infamous Beverly Hills Lingerie Street Fight Battle Royal, which the first and only that's ever happened as far as I know. How did that come about? Because it was such a, that was a unique pay-per-view event because there were all these different promotions that were involved, but that was one of the only real times that we saw you try to take the essence of WOW or Glow and put that into, let's say, a mainstream wrestling promotion broadcast and work with somebody else. How did that all come about? Because it was, to me, that's a very interesting pay-per-view when we talk about the history of wrestling, because it was so unique, and for a lot of those talents, it was the only pay-per-view they were ever on.
Well, one, I grew up working for Dick the Bruiser, and the Bruiser and Wilbur Snyder were partners with Vern Gagne. And subsequently, Vern Gagne and I became close friends. And when I left Glow, the original cast of Glow, 90% of them all left with me. So there were only maybe, 3 or 4 performers of the original Glow that stayed in Glow and participated in its season 3 and 4. And the rest had left. And subsequently, we were able to package some of the pro wrestlers that were on the circuit, Candy Devine, Wendy Richter, others, with some of the performers that had left with me from Glow. And Vern and Greg Gagne thought it would be unique and fun. And it was made basically by Vern just calling me up at home and saying, hey, I've loved watching the women's wrestling. No one knows this, but I am a fan of it. And could you help me put together a women's match in a spectacular for this Superclash? And Jerry Jarrett and I had known each other for some time, and we all just got together, I think up in Chicago, and we packaged it. And it was fun for me because I got to meet Kerry Von Erich, who I had been a fan of for some time, and he wrestled Jerry Lawler, and it was a spectacular match. So I enjoyed the evening very much beyond just putting on a women's spectacular on that show.
One of the things you talked about is Jeanie Buss getting so involved. How did that connection come about? Was she a fan of what you had done previously? Was it a connection that you had made through your foray with ESPN and other sports? How did that connection come about? Because I think, like, even with the Los Angeles Times article that ran last week, when they realize that she's in front of this and she's a big part of WOW, there's sort of like a surprise because she's such a major mainstream sports personality. How did that connection between you and her first come together?
After I had sold Glow, I started a roller hockey league with ESPN and Walt Disney World. And we had and at the same exact time, Jeanie and a group of gentlemen had started another roller hockey league that played in the arenas, such as the Great Western Forum. And whereas I had a worldwide TV deal with my roller hockey league out of Walt Disney, they had arenas. It was suggested that we merge the two entities, and we did. And I met Jeanie at a luncheon the day after we completed the deal with the lawyers, and I moved out to California and moved my office to the Great Western Forum, an office next to Jeanie, and she was one of the owners of the league and owner of one of the teams that participated in the Roller Hockey League, that our games were on ESPN and ESPN2. So it's a over 20-some year relationship that we've been friends. And even though we were friends when WOW started, and it was in the Great Western Forum, which we televised our initial events from, which she was the president of at the time, Jeanie would never come to the initial WOW matches. And I'd call her to beg her to come down to the WOW matches, and she'd say, "No, I'm not going to come down. I don't want to see it. I don't think, it's for me." And so finally she, acquiesced, and she said, "Okay, I'm coming in, but we're going to stay for 5-10 minutes and leave." Well, at about 12 midnight, I still saw her in the locker room, and she said, "How do I get involved? This is the greatest thing I've seen. This is something I want to be involved in. If they had something like this when I was younger, it would be just spectacular." And her response has been echoed by so many females since that time. Even the gentleman that's been working with me in the last month on some other properties, his wife came to a Friday night fight recently, just last week here in Long Beach, and I'll tell you about those in a minute. And his wife had the same trepidations as Jeanie Buss going to her first event, and he came over on Sunday to say, "My God, my wife wants to know how does she get tickets to the Belasco next Thursday on the 29th in downtown LA. She loves it." So I think that's how we're changing the status quo. We're changing people's perception of women's wrestling. And so Jeanie became engaged and involved in WOW vis-a-vis her coming to a live event and experiencing it. And WOW went off the air, 9/11 hit. And the ad market, we were in syndication at the time also, just as we noted being on a late night in New York. And the advertising market just dried up. And I just, could not sustain the financial capitalization and losses that were occurring because of the ad market. I mean, when 9/11 hit, the market just completely was turned upside down. And advertising dried up, and syndication took a rough hit, not just WOW, a lot of programming. And subsequently, I had to pull the programming from television. And when that happened, I went back to ESPN and we started some more programming there. And it was around 2013 when Jeanie and I were having dinner in downtown LA, how appropriate, vis-a-vis that's where our show will be next week, that she said, "Let's bring it out. We got to get ahead of the curve because, digital technology is taking off. And now we're going to be able very shortly to deliver the content to the fans directly, worldwide." And she was right. It's here. And I got to take your hat off to the WWE and Vince McMahon and their leadership, because they really were ahead of the curve digitally, way ahead of even any of the major sports leagues. And networks. They just were out way in front of it and have built a terrific network that all the wrestling fans love and enjoy. And it's great because fans can see wrestling now any time of the day, when before they had to wait, till every Saturday morning or Sunday to see it.
You wanted to talk about the events in Long Beach. Let's talk about those.
We recognized there was a problem, and the problem was getting the fans enough content for them to enjoy it, one live and then weekly. And these big events, I call them the showcase events that WOW is known for, that we do in Las Vegas and we're doing next Thursday in LA, those cannot be sustained on a weekly or bi-weekly level. And so economically, as we start this, we thought, okay, how do we best position us for long-term success? And we don't, blow up vis-a-vis putting on great big spectaculars while we try to grow the awareness for the brand. And the idea emerged really from the essence of me growing up in wrestling. And in Indiana, I would go to all the small cities: Peru, Indiana, Terre Haute, South Bend, Hammond, Indiana, Fort Wayne, down to Evansville, and we'd see great wrestling events. And some of them during the summertime were outdoors, at the state fairs, etc. So I was friends with the general manager and owner of a hotel in Long Beach, California, and we were out having dinner. And I said, you've got a fabulous property right on the entry point of Long Beach, 2nd and PCH. And I've got an idea. Why don't we throw the WOW Women of Wrestling events there, twice a month on Friday night, brand them Friday Night Fight, and really give the college kids in the community of Long Beach an opportunity to come out and have fun. So it emerged, the Friday night series emerged from, one, my background in wrestling, two, my love of Long Beach, California. I actually live part-time here. And knowing the community and the fans wanted to experience WOW live. So it worked. We've had 2 events. We've had great crowds. It provides us content for the WOW Superheroes platforms and the WWE website, and for the future episodes that will be launched on Thanksgiving Day. And it's great. And it's an opportunity for some wrestlers. Last Friday night, we had 2 wrestlers. I can't recall their names, but they wrestle on the independent circuit. And they came down for the opening event, the opening match, so I could watch them and see them actually perform in front of a crowd. So it was like an open tryout for 2 performers that wanted to be a part of WOW Women of Wrestling. So it's fun. Pabst Blue Ribbon is one of the sponsors. So there's a lot of popping of beer. There's a big bar there, and it's outdoors under the palm trees and the moon and the stars. And we've got a live DJ that's playing music. And it's fun. It's fun. And if there's one thing, you spoke about the essence of GLOW being over the top. WOW's going to be over the top, but more importantly, it's going to be really fun. And I think that's what's been missing in wrestling for some time. And at least we know that from our market research. It's going to be fun. And isn't that what we all want to go have? To go to wrestling, have a lot of fun.
That's why we're talking about it. We love wrestling. We want to have fun. That's why everybody goes to a wrestling event. We've kept you far longer than we agreed to, so I apologize about that. I want to thank you so much for your time. I look forward to seeing how the project continues to evolve. We'll have links under this interview, but everybody can check out more about WOW Women of Wrestling at WOWE.com, and they can follow it on Twitter at WOW Superheroes, twitter.com/WOW Superheroes. But, sir, I have to ask you one last question. It'll be a fun question. How does one make the leap? Because most people think of you as professional. When they think of you wrestling, they think of GLOW and Hollywood and WOW and all this stuff. And Fifi, the farmer's daughter. How does one get from there from running a Dick the Bruiser fan club? So talk about falling in love with Dick the Bruiser. And I know this is probably a long story, but how we go from there to creating the essence and founding GLOW and putting it in Las Vegas and syndicating and all that. So what was it about Dick the Bruiser that just enraptured you, and how does one go about making that journey?
Well, what enraptured me about Dick the Bruiser was I was a young kid, and we'd watch him in Indianapolis on WTTV TV, and Chuck Marlowe was the announcer. And my good buddy out of Indianapolis, who's a worldwide known photographer, Scott Romer, who's one of the best photographers in the entire business, along with George Napolitano in your home state of New York. We would go to the wrestling matches and watch Bobby Heenan, Baron von Raschke, Ernie Ladd, Dick the Bruiser, The Crusher, Cowboy Bob Ellis, and Mitsu Arakawa and Kim Duck, all the wrestling stars back in that era. And I even remember Bruno Sammartino would come in and wrestle with the Bruiser. So like all of us that love wrestling, we get hooked on it usually at a young age. And as I grew older and was into the merchandising and licensing of product for the Midwest, all around for Bruiser and Gagne, etc., we had a wrestling match, and it was Candy Divine against Princess Jasmine, and the match tore the house down. It was a spectacular event. And I remember asking, by that time I was the announcer for the Bruiser. The late Sam Menaker had retired. And I was fortunate enough to be selected by Bruiser to be the announcer. Little did I know that it would lead to a further career in wrestling. And subsequently, I asked the fans, how would you like to see these two lady wrestlers in a match? And I think I said because they were running around the ring a cage match or something. And the crowd went wild. And I went downstairs to tell the Bruiser, hey, we've got something here. We can have a spectacular women's wrestling match at the next event. And he looked at me and said, are you out of your mind? He goes, we don't promote women's wrestling. That's just one of the side matches we put on. And that struck a nerve with me. Why aren't we promoting women's wrestling? I mean, they were actually more athletic than Moose Cholak and Ox Baker and some of the other performers on the event. So that dropped the seed in the back of my head that women's wrestling needed to be elevated. And I spoke to him about it, and I even spoke to Vern about it initially, and everyone's position on it was no, no, no. And there's one thing in life, don't tell David McLane no, because no is the first means to yes for me. And I said, we're going to start a women's wrestling league. And they told me I was out of my mind. And I won't do it in this interview, but one time you'll call me back if you'll have me back, Mike, and we'll tell you how Glow actually really did start.
I would love to do that anytime you want, and we'll figure out a time when we can do that. But right now, all eyes are on September 29th at the Belasco Theater in Los Angeles for the Big WOW taping. As David said, there's going to be some Glow alumni in attendance. There's going to be some cool matches. There's going to be a big ceremony to start it out. And then on the 30th, there's going to be another one of these spotlight events in Long Beach. You can find out complete information on that on the WOW website, WOWE.com. Links right underneath. And we'll be looking forward to covering the continued adventures of the WOW Superheroes. And David, if I have one request, I know you're not going to be as involved, but I do hope we do get to see your office in the telephone booth at some point.
Oh, you struck a good chord with that, because we two quick notes if we have time.
Sure.
We were training in the Millennium Hotel in downtown Los Angeles a couple of years ago, and the Millennium staff took me down to their ballroom to say, hey, we can put the WOW wrestling ring up here. And right to the side of the ballroom, I said, well, where could we store some of our stuff? We have a lot of stuff to store. And they said, come right this way, David. We'll show you where you can put everything. They opened up the door, and there was a phone booth, a red phone booth. And I said, I laughed and said, oh, my goodness, I've got my new office. So we won't have a phone booth in WOW. We've got to graduate to the new technology of mobile. but
There you go.
we may have something in store that I am hesitating to put into the WOW shows. But based on your fun that you just mentioned, you enjoyed the telephone booth. We may do something. I just haven't figured out how we put it into the WOW show. But any fan of Glow, if they see it, again, will have a fun chuckle and enjoy it if we do it. So they'll have to watch the shows when they get released. Get those tickets, fans. Get the tickets. They're on sale now, WOWE.com. There's some ringside seats left. There's a few of the VIP meet and greets left, and great seats in the balcony at the Belasco. It's a fabulous theater. And you've been so nice to host me, Mike. Excuse me. I want you to know, if you make it out, you've got front row seats on me.
Well, I appreciate that offer, and if I end up in Los Angeles on the 29th, you'll know way in advance. And if not, then down the line, I look forward to hitting another WOW show. And we look forward to, as I said, covering the continued exploits of the WOW superheroes. And I look forward to having you back on, because I want to know the story of Glow, because to me it's one of the more fascinating pieces of wrestling lore, and it's an interesting slice of the pie when we look at professional wrestling history, because I'd love to talk to you about even when Glow toured and ran a bunch of cities across the country. But we'll get back there. Right now, the focus, everybody, July. We're already in September. September 29th, the Belasco Theater in Los Angeles. And Mr. David McLane, I thank you so much for being so kind with your time, staying with us a little longer than we expected. And everyone check out WOW at WOE.com, WOWE.com. And, sir, thank you so much for your time. I had a great time talking to you.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Until next time here on PWInsider.com, I'm Mike Johnson. Check out WOW on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and stay tuned, because they've got a lot of plans for this promotion. Until next time, I'm Mike Johnson. Take care, everybody, and we appreciate your support.